Hey everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And this week we're looking at the best-selling crossover on the Canadian market, the Ford Escape. It's been in the company's line since 2000, and it really did sort of pioneer this idea of a smaller crossover vehicle that still has some of the capabilities of a SUV, but perhaps a little bit smaller for city driving, a bit more fuel efficient as well. Now, while you might look at this version and think to yourself that it's a completely redesigned edition of the Escape, in fact, its underpinnings are still very much the same, but the exterior's had a bit of a refresh, the interior looks a little bit sharper as well, and we also have a new engine available to us, a 1.5 liter EcoBoost. So we're going to take it for a spin and see if it's still king of the crossover market. Well, as is the case with a lot of Ford products these days, there's a lot of wading through options and trims and engines when you're looking at the Escape. And that's great, but it also means that the price can climb up really quickly on you. And it's a little bit misleading as well, because while the base price on this is $23,500, that's a front-wheel drive vehicle with a pretty basic 4-cylinder, non-turbo, non-EcoBoost engine on board. You don't get a lot of standard features either when you compare this to the competitors that are out there. A lot of vehicles, even at their base price, are offering things like heated front seats, a rear backup camera, maybe even automatic dual zone climate control, and we don't have those sorts of things here on that base price for the Escape. Then when we climb up into this SE trim, which is middle of the road, and the chart topping titanium trim, you're looking at almost twice the price in some cases. Here in this SE trim, which is the mid-level trim that I'm in here today, things have been added on that maybe a tester might have liked to see. Things like a power lift gate for $500, a panorama sunroof for $1,700, voice activated navigation for $800, the sport appearance package with these blacked out rims which look kind of cool, a leather wrapped steering wheel, that's a $1,500 package. All of a sudden we're at $36,500. And while, as I mentioned, for 2017, this isn't a redesign, there are some nice little tweaks on the interior that I've noticed as soon as I hopped into this new Escape. First up, the shifter's been taken from a sort of weird angled position, more up on the dashboard here, to a more conventional position in the center console. It's just a bit easier to use, and it also means that there's a lot more storage options available to you here around the center console. Elsewhere, really happy to see this Sync 3 infotainment system available on the SE and Titanium trims. The previous Sync system was laggy, the navigation software wasn't great. Definitely some big improvements here for 2017 with this Sync 3 setup. Now, speaking of all the sort of tech on board here, you can now plug either your Apple or Android phone directly into the entertainment system and use the in-house Apple or Google map software. Use some of the apps that are on board those phones as well. It means that you don't necessarily have to get the Ford in-house navigation system. You can forego that extra $800 or whatever it's going to cost you to get that installed, and instead just go with what's available to you directly from your smartphone. That's pretty slick, and I think that's the way that a lot of companies are going to start to go. Instead of in-house navigation, we'll start to see them using a lot more of what's actually on your phone. And then, speaking of your smartphone, for the first time ever on a Ford product, the Escape offers the Sync Connect system. And this is something that's been on the Lincoln line of vehicles for a while now, proved to be quite popular. It's an app on your phone which allows you to do things like lock or unlock your doors, check how much fuel is in your fuel tank, book a service appointment, things like that from right on your phone. Pretty slick, and nice to see it now entering the Ford line of vehicles too. Other optional tech that's available to you for 2017, well, we have an automatic start-stop function, which will turn off the engine when you're at a stop sign, a stoplight, or in real heavy stop-and-go traffic. I'm in that right now, actually, and you can see the engine's turned off. You might hear that now when I start rolling, kicks in again. That's pretty slick. And then some of the optional safety features, which are becoming a bit more mainstream: adaptive cruise control, lane keeping assist technology, brake collision mitigation as well, so the vehicle will brake for you if you're not reacting quickly enough to a vehicle that's stopped up in front of you. The adaptive cruise control on this Escape, by the way, way better than what I had in that Ford F-150 a few weeks ago. That system, when I was on the highway in the F-150, was braking happening really suddenly, even when there wasn't a vehicle in front of me. And it was really kind of scary, actually. I put about 400 kilometers on this vehicle this week on the highway and didn't have that happen once. So nice to see that that's not an issue here for the 2017 Escape. Now, a big reason why companies are starting to pile on these safety features as options is because it puts them into the running for a top Safety Pick Plus rating from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. However, the Escape fell a little bit short, and that's because it didn't do particularly well in the small front overlap collision test from the IIHS. And that's an important test because it's a very common type of accident, and it can also be very dangerous. When you compare that to, say, the Hyundai Tucson, the Kia Sportage, those vehicles do have a top Safety Pick Plus rating, and that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to be carting your family around in the Escape. So we've already talked about that basic 4-cylinder engine, which comes standard on the bottom of the line Escape. But there are also two other engines that you can choose from. First up is a 2-liter EcoBoost, which we've seen in the Escape before and comes standard on the titanium trim or as an option here on the SE trim. But new for 2017 is this 1.5-liter EcoBoost. And when I heard, 1.5 liters for a crossover vehicle of this size, I just wasn't sure if it would have enough juice. But I'm really impressed with what Ford has managed to pull out of a 1.5-liter engine. However, the thing is that Ford's saying that you should expect to see about 8.5 to 10.5 liters per 100 kilometers as your average fuel economy. And I'm not touching that this week. Even when I try really, really hard, I'm more averaging about 9.5 on the highway and 12.5 in the city. It's just not living up to what Ford's saying you should get, and I find that's often the case with its EcoBoost engines. This is coupled, regardless of the engine that you go for, with a 6-speed automatic. It's very smooth, no complaints here, and Ford's going with the traditional automatic transmission rather than a continuously variable transmission like we're seeing in the Honda CR-V, for example, and people are complaining about a little bit because they just kind of drone along and they're not particularly inspiring to drive. Another real surprise out of the Escape was its maximum towing capacity. Depending on the engine that you go for and whether you have the towing package, you can get up to 3,500 pounds of towing out of this thing. And for an SUV of this size, that really blows a lot of its competition out of the water. Take the Kia Sportage, for example, which can only tow 2,000 pounds. Even our Volvo station wagon, which has a V6 engine on board with a turbocharger, can't tow as much as this vehicle can, depending on the package that you go for. So that's a pretty nice little bit of kit as well for a car of this size. Ride quality, also really good. Ford does a nice job in terms of its suspension, and the tuning means that it's not going to bob and weave through the corners, but it's also not so harsh that you're going to feel every bump as you go along. One thing I wasn't quite so pleased about was our decibel reader test. 100 kilometers an hour on the same stretch of highway we always use, this vehicle reached 67 decibels, which is louder than the Kia Sportage that we had out a couple of weeks ago, and quite a lot louder than that real gold standard surprise winner that we got a couple of weeks ago, the Ford F-150 Limited, which hit 56 decibels. This is not a loud ride, but it's certainly not the quietest that we found either. Seat comfort here in the second row, unfortunately not quite as good as what we saw up front in the Escape. You can see as a full-size adult, I'm definitely feeling pretty scrunched in back here. It's a bit claustrophobic, even though the front driver's seat does have a sort of dished out space here for your legs to fit into. That is a full-size adult with a tall driver up front. I'm just really squeezed in back here. We also have just kind of cheaper end materials back here, a lot of clunky plastics. It just doesn't feel as well considered as some of the other crossovers that I've seen in this segment. One thing that I love about this Ford, and a lot of Fords have this, is this conventional household plug. So if you wanted to plug in a tool on a job site to charge it, or if you had, say, a cooler on a family road trip you wanted to plug in, you can do that really easily right there. Now you can see here that this is sort of a mixed medium surface here in terms of seats on this tester. This is an option. Looks kind of cool with this stitching. I'm finding that where people actually put their bums, this material here, this cloth, is actually really challenging to keep clean. You can see the dog hair is really piling on here, and a lot of little nooks and crannies to keep clean. So I don't know, if it were me, I would look at the titanium package with the leather. It would just be a lot easier to keep clean for family living. Meanwhile, let's check out the trunk. The lift gate update is a feature that we've got here on this tester, and we've got our standardized trunk test at a go here. We've got a diaper bag, a backpack, a stroller, a soccer ball, and a couple bags of groceries, and enough room just for a dog as well. Actually, I thought this trunk was going to be a little bit smaller just at first sight compared to some of the other SUVs that or crossovers that we've tested recently, but it's actually 964 liters, which makes it 20% bigger than that Kia Sportage from a couple of weeks ago. And nice to see that those second row seats will fold completely flat as well, because that means that this will certainly be able to haul a lot more gear on a Costco run. Meanwhile, a rear-facing car seat is not doing any favors to front passenger comfort. You can see here, yep, less than 7 inches of legroom. According to our measuring tape up front here, that's less than the Honda Fit that we tested last year on the show. The result is really no legroom at all. My knees are totally jammed up against the dashboard here. I do like, as I mentioned before, all these little storage nooks here on the center console. That's nicely executed for 2017. You can see here my grapefruit peels and Kleenex. I have been battling through a cold this week, so thanks for going through that with me. I would say that in terms of storage, trunk space is really good compared to a lot of the competition. I like a lot of these little nooks that you can store things, but in terms of actual legroom and passenger comfort for second row seating, and if you do have car seats in the family, it's going to be a squeeze for you. So really just some nips and tucks for 2017 here in the Escape, but the changes that have been made are solid and they make the vehicle better. I do think that in terms of standard features, what you're getting for the base price, Ford's lagging behind a little bit compared to the competition, and it needs to up its game there a little bit. I also think that in terms of its fuel efficiency, it's lagging behind a little bit too. But I'd like to know what you think. What vehicle are you cross-shopping with this car, and how does it compare in your mind? What would you change in the Escape? You can leave a comment below. Please subscribe while you're at it, and then check out familywheels.ca for our bullet point report card on this vehicle for a full rundown on what we think needs to be improved upon and what really makes it shine as well. Next week on the program, we're in the much sportier but similarly sized Audi SQ5. Make sure to tune in for that, and we'll see you in about 7 days.